Welcome to reform thinking. You know, um, usually when we log into our bank accounts or like check a retirement portfolio, we're looking for a very specific kind of security.
Oh, yeah. We want to see those numbers go up.
Right. The numbers go up, our blood pressure goes down. I mean, it feels like this mathematical equation for peace of mind. We just assume that more assets equal less vulnerability.
Yeah, that is pretty much the standard human operating system. We want a highly quantifiable metric for safety. We prefer things we can count, things we can store in a vault.
Things that give us a buffer against the unknown.
Precisely. Because, well, we are terrified of being vulnerable. And currency is basically the most universally accepted shield against that vulnerability.
But then you open up the ancient letters of the New Testament, and suddenly that whole financial ledger is flipped completely upside down. I mean, we are looking at a spiritual economy that is, honestly, it's shocking.
It really is.
So today, we are tearing up that modern financial ledger. We're doing a deep dive into an ancient letter, the Apostle Paul's letter to Timothy, specifically 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 6 through 19.
Such a crucial text.
It is. Our mission today is to dissect this clash between spiritual contentment and, well, the endless human craving for material gain. We want to look at this ancient text and see how it speaks directly to you, the listener, right where you are today.
And what stands out to me is just the absolute relevance of this passage to the modern context you live in right now. I mean, we exist in an era defined by staggering consumer debt.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You are constantly surrounded by marketing algorithms that are literally engineered to manufacture dissatisfaction in your mind. Every social media feed is, it's a highly sophisticated machine designed to make you feel like what you have is inadequate.
Yeah, it's wild when you think about it like that. We're seeing skyrocketing rates of anxiety and existential dread, even in some of the most affluent societies in human history.
Right, and this isn't some new psychological phenomenon. It's an ancient spiritual malady. Humans falsely believe that safety, satisfaction, and significance can just be purchased with currency.
So I want to unpack the core thesis of this entire section, because Paul starts with this massive radical reversal. The culture we swim in claims that gaining earthly assets brings peace.
Yeah, the equation we're sold is super simple.
Right. If you just get the promotion, if you just hit that specific number in your savings, then you will achieve contentment. But Paul argues the complete opposite.
He really does.
He states that godliness joined with contentment is the greatest possible gain. He hijacks the vocabulary of profit and completely redefines it.
The contrast is stark, to say the least. But to grasp why Paul wrote so forcefully about money, we have to look at the specific city where young Timothy was stationed as a pastor.
Because context is everything here.
Yes, the environmental pressure Timothy was under is vital to understanding the text. He was stationed in Ephesus in the 1st century, and we need to clear away any idea that Ephesus was some quiet, rural, out-of-the-way village.
It was huge, right?
Oh, it was a massive economic hub. It was the undisputed religious capital of the entire region. The city was completely dominated by the Temple of Artemis, which, was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world.
Yeah, and when you dig into the historical records of 1st century Ephesus, you find something staggering. The Temple of Artemis wasn't just a place where people went to sing hymns or offer sacrifices.
No, not at all.
It actually functioned as the primary banking institution of Asia Minor.
That is a crucial historical reality to wrap our heads around. We have to understand how ancient banking worked. Today, if you want to protect capital, you put it in a fortified vault, right?
Right.
With digital encryption and armed guards.
Sure.
But in the ancient world, the most secure place you could possibly put your wealth was inside a major temple.
Because of the psychological deterrent, right? Like, if someone robs a standard treasury, they're just a thief.
Yeah.
But if they rob the Temple of Artemis, they're committing sacrilege against a deity.
Spot on. The fear of divine retribution acted as the ultimate security system. So kings deposited their national treasuries there.
Wow.
Yeah, massive merchants held their capital there to fund international trade routes. Everyday citizens used it for their life savings. Religion and massive financial enterprise were fused together in a way that is really hard for a modern person to comprehend.
That's fascinating.
And you also had an entire local economy built around this system. The silversmith guilds made absolute fortunes fabricating small shrines and idols for the thousands of pilgrims flooding the city. Religion was big business.
The economic and the religious spheres were just indistinguishable.
Completely.
So into this environment comes a group of false teachers, and they look at this massive wealth-generating machine of the Artemis cult, And they look at the newly formed Christian church and they start doing the math.
Yeah, they saw an opportunity.
The historical context shows that proto-Gnostic heretics had infiltrated the leadership of the Ephesian congregation. But I want to pause here for a second. What does proto-Gnostic actually mean in this context? And, how did they monetize it?
Well, Gnosticism, in its fully developed form, taught that the material world was evil and the spiritual realm was good, and salvation came through acquiring secret, elevated knowledge, the Greek word gnosis.
Okay.
So these proto-Gnostics in Ephesus were early versions of this. They basically viewed Christian ministry as a lucrative commercial enterprise. They weren't just preaching bad theology, they were peddling novel doctrines.
Right, arguing about endless genealogies and myths.
Yeah, and they were essentially charging a premium for it. They operated on the assumption that godliness was a pathway to financial status.
So they created a tiered pay-to-play religion. They look at the massive wealth of the Artemis cult and decided they wanted to recreate that revenue stream inside the church.
That's pretty much it.
They figured if you wanted the elite spiritual secrets, you needed to pay the elite spiritual teachers. I mean, it's like a massive aggressive hedge fund operating under the guise of a megachurch.
That is a great way to put it.
They're using spiritual language, but the bottom line is purely financial extraction. So how difficult would it be for a young pastor like Timothy to convince his congregation to ignore the economic powerhouse of their city and follow a crucified carpenter instead?
Honestly, it would have been an almost insurmountable task from a human perspective. The immense social and political pressure Timothy faced just cannot be overstated.
Because of the culture of that time.
Yes. In the Greco-Roman world, you had the patronage system. Every morning, clients would gather at the home of a wealthy patron for the salutatio, which was a formal greeting.
Okay, and what happened there?
Well, the patron would hand out the sportula, a small gift of money or food, and in exchange, the clients owed the patron intense public loyalty and social backing.
Ah, I see.
And affluent citizens expected this exact same dynamic to play out in whatever community they joined, and that included the church.
So if a wealthy patron funded a meeting space or provided food for the Lord's Supper, they fully expected the pastor to cater to their preferences. They expected special influence.
Yes, they certainly did. And Timothy had to completely dismantle this economic theological matrix using only the apostolic truth.
That sounds incredibly stressful.
Oh, for sure. He had to stand up to wealthy heretics and tell them their money bought them zero influence in the kingdom of God. He was asking his congregation to reject the entire financial ecosystem of Ephesus.
That takes an incredible amount of courage. I mean, if true contentment is finding our rest in God's provision, what happens when the people around Timothy are equating a high income with high spiritual status?
Well, Paul has to totally redefine what gain actually means for the believer.
Right. And looking at the linguistics of the text, Paul uses a specific word to shock his original audience.
The linguistics here are stunning, really. We need to unpack the Greek word for contentment that Paul uses in verse 6. The word is autarkia.
Autarkia, okay.
In the surrounding Greco-Roman culture, this was a highly recognizable philosophical term. Stoic philosophers like Seneca the Younger and the later emperor Marcus Aurelius used autarkia to describe an autonomous, self-sufficient mind.
Okay, I want to dive into that Stoic mindset for a second. How did a Stoic actually achieve this autarkia? Like, what was the mechanism?
Well, for the Stoic, contentment meant hardening your mind against external circumstances through sheer willpower. The goal was apatheia, basically the eradication of emotional distress.
Wow, okay.
It was achieved by brutally severing your emotional attachment to anything you could not control. So if you lost your wealth, you convinced yourself you never needed it.
And if you lost a person?
If you lost a loved one, you convinced yourself that death is just a natural recycling of atoms. Autarkia was about needing nothing and no one.
That sounds miserable.
It was a rigorous, almost cold detachment from the world, achieved entirely by your own mental strength. It was the ultimate declaration of self-reliance.
But Paul takes this pagan philosophical term, and he completely baptizes it. He redefines the mechanism. For the believer, autarkia is not self-sufficiency at all. It's Christ's sufficiency. It is the peaceful rest of the soul in divine providence. The Stoic says, I am content because I have detached myself from all needs.
Right.
The Christian says, I am content because I have a loving Father who orders my daily portion, and he will provide exactly what I need.
Yes. The Christian is not detached from reality. The Christian is attached to a sovereign provider. And Paul grounds this theological pivot in a very stark biological reality.
The reality of life and death.
Yes, he brings in the eschatological grounding of verses 7 and 8. He forces Timothy to look at a timeline that stretches beyond the grave. He writes that we brought nothing into the world and we can carry nothing out.
It's literally a funeral sermon, preached over every idol. I mean, the newborn enters the world empty-handed, completely vulnerable, possessing absolutely zero capital.
That's right.
And the corpse leaves the world empty-handed. Death strips away every single idol. Every bank account, every piece of real estate, every stock option stays on this side of the dirt.
It's a sobering thought.
It makes me think of, like, if you pack for a vacation to a foreign country where your current currency is completely unaccepted, all your heavy luggage is rendered completely useless the second you step off the plane.
That visual captures the absurdity of hoarding perfectly. The accumulation of wealth is essentially packing heavy bags with counterfeit money for a trip to eternity.
Yeah.
But this raises a very practical question that needs careful handling.
Right. And I want to push back on behalf of you listening. Because if the text says we should be satisfied with just food and covering, does this condemn earning a good living?
That's the logical next question.
I mean, are we looking at a mandate for asceticism here? Does it mean pursuing higher education, building a career, or having a well-funded savings account is inherently sinful? Are we all supposed to take a vow of artificial poverty and go live in the woods?
Not at all. That is a massive misunderstanding of Paul's theology. The text absolutely honors diligent labor and wise stewardship.
Okay.
In fact, in other letters, Paul commands believers to work hard with their hands so they can provide for dependents. And later in this very same letter, 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17, Paul says that God richly provides us with everything to enjoy. God is not anti-material. He created the material world.
So what is the actual target of Paul's condemnation here?
What the text condemns is the restless, anxious demand that you require more before you can offer gratitude or find peace. The sin is the prerequisite you place on your own joy.
Wow, that's a great way to phrase it.
Contentment means your obedience and your joy do not wait upon abundance. You can be content with basic necessities, food, and covering.
And if you have more than that?
If God provides more than that, you hold it with an open hand, recognizing it as a temporary stewardship rather than a permanent identity. The issue is where your soul goes to find rest.
Okay, so if resting in God's provision is the baseline for Christian peace, what happens to the human brain when we reject that baseline and decide to chase the silver instead?
Well, Paul maps out the psychology of that exact collapse in verse 9.
Right. He outlines a terrifying chain reaction for those who desire to acquire wealth. And notice, it's the desire that initiates the destruction. But wait, isn't desire just a natural human impulse?
What do you mean?
I desire a cup of coffee in the morning. I desire to pay my mortgage. Why is Paul criminalizing the desire itself?
Because the Greek verb used here, bulimai, implies a settled intention, a driving will, a calculated life trajectory.
Oh, I see.
This isn't a passing thought about paying a bill. This is a core life philosophy that says, I will be wealthy. Paul outlines a downward progression that is chilling.
Walk us through that progression.
It starts with that settled desire, which creates a vulnerability. You begin making compromises. That vulnerability leads you into temptation. And the temptation springs a trap, becoming a snare.
Let's talk about how a snare works mechanically, because that is a very specific metaphor. A snare is not a brick wall that stops you. It's a hidden loop that catches you while you're moving forward.
Exactly.
You think you're walking freely in the woods. You step into the trap, and the harder you pull to get free, the tighter the wire cuts into your leg.
Yes. And once you're caught in that snare, the text says it spawns many foolish and hurtful lusts. You start desiring things you never even cared about before because the wealth has opened up new avenues of indulgence.
Right.
And those lusts eventually plunge a person into complete ruin and destruction. The Greek word for plunge actually means to sink to the bottom of the sea. It's a psychological and spiritual drowning.
The linguistic precision Paul uses to describe this drowning is fascinating. Let's zero in on verse 10, the famous quote, "The love of money is a root of all kinds of evils." The Greek word used here is philargeria. What makes this word so specific?
Well, this word occurs only this one time in the entire New Testament. It's a compound word. Philos, meaning love or affection, and argyros, meaning silver.
Okay.
Now, there is a broader Greek word for general greed, which is pleonexia. Pleonexia means the insatiable desire for more, anything more status, more control, more land, more praise.
But this is different.
Yes, philargyria implies a highly specific, affectionate attachment to physical currency. It is the literal love of the silver coin. It's finding emotional comfort in the tangible presence of wealth.
Like pulling out your phone to look at your stock portfolio just to feel a dopamine hit of safety.
Spot on. That is philargyria in action.
I want to clarify a crucial syntactical detail here, too, because grammar matters. The Greek noun for root lacks a definite article. It is a root, not the sole root of all evil in the universe.
Yeah, right.
I mean, murder, pride, and lust have other roots as well.
That is a frequent misquotation. People say money is the root of all evil. First, it is the love of money. Second, it is a root. It's a highly toxic soil.
Okay.
From this specific toxic soil, every conceivable species of wickedness can spring forth. Think about the sheer variety of sins born from the love of silver.
Oh, it's endless.
It produces lies on tax returns. It produces the injustice of underpaying workers. It fuels political compromise, bitter family feuds over inheritances, ministerial corruption, human trafficking, and doctrinal betrayal. It's a terrifyingly fertile ground for sin.
I think about the desire for extreme wealth, like the biological mechanism of drinking salt water when you're stranded at sea in a life raft.
That's a vivid picture.
You're incredibly thirsty, the sun is beating down on you, and that water looks so refreshing it promises to quench your thirst. But when you drink it, the mechanism of osmotic diuresis kicks in.
Right, your body reacts.
Yeah, your kidneys have to use more of your body's existing water to flush out the heavy salt content than the amount of water you actually ingested. It rapidly accelerates your cellular dehydration.
Oh, wow.
It literally destroys your organs from the inside out. The more you drink, the faster you die. That is exactly what the love of currency does to the human soul. It promises life, but mechanistically delivers death.
That physiological reality perfectly parallels the spiritual reality. The accumulation demands more accumulation to sustain the same feeling of safety. And this leads us to one of the most sobering statements in the entire passage.
Which is?
The text mentions that some, by craving the silver, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs. This raises massive theological questions about salvation, perseverance, and human action.
Okay, let's look at that. If a person wanders from the faith because of their greed, does a true believer lose their justification? Do they fall out of a state of grace because their bank account becomes an idol?
We have to look at this through a highly precise theological framework. Relying on the historical formulations of Reformed theology, specifically looking at documents like the Westminster Confession of Faith, we find a very robust doctrine of the perseverance of the saints.
Right.
The Reformed perspective interprets this wandering from the faith not as a true regenerate believer losing their actual salvation. Rather, the love of money acts as a stress test that exposes a false, unregenerate profession.
Meaning they appear to be part of the visible covenant community, they took communion, they sang the hymns, but their heart was never actually regenerated by the Holy Spirit.
Precisely. The classic biblical example is Judas Iscariot. Judas walked with the apostles for 3 years. He heard the greatest sermons ever preached. He witnessed the dead being raised.
He had a front row seat to all of it.
He did. And from the outside, he looked like a faithful, functioning disciple. He was even trusted to hold the money box. But his love for the 30 pieces of silver acted as an instrument of divine judgment.
Oh, I see.
His greed exposed the fact that he was a hypocrite who remained unregenerate the entire time. The love of money functions as a severe diagnostic tool that reveals whether a person's faith is a genuine submission to Christ or just a convenient social posture.
That forces everyone listening to examine their own motives. I mean, are we following Christ for the potential cultural benefits, or is there a genuine supernatural affection for the Savior?
It's a tough question to ask yourself.
It is. Now, this discussion of theology and evidence brings up another major point of debate regarding good works. Let's look ahead to verse 19. Paul commands those with material abundance to be generous, ready to share, in order to lay up a good foundation for the future.
Yes, that's a key verse.
So if Paul says lay up a good foundation for the future by doing good works, a Roman Catholic apologist historically might point to this and say, look, you are securing your standing before God through almsgiving. You are buying the foundation. Your financial generosity earns merit toward your salvation.
I see where they get that argument.
How does Reformed theology interpret this without contradicting the core doctrine of justification by faith alone?
Well, we have to understand the mechanism of justification. The Reformed position is absolute. Justification is an act of God's free grace, received by faith alone, resting on the finished work of Christ alone.
So you can't purchase it.
No, you cannot buy your way into heaven no matter how much you give to the poor. The commanded good works, the generosity, the sharing are never the root cause of a person's salvation.
If it doesn't earn salvation, what is the actual function of this radical generosity?
Generosity is the mandatory, spontaneous, and joyful fruit of a justified life. Good works do not secure your salvation. They prove that your salvation is real.
Okay, that makes sense.
Think of an apple tree. The apples do not turn the wood into an apple tree. The apples prove that the wood is already an apple tree by nature.
That's a great analogy.
When a person gives freely and cheerfully, it proves that the Holy Spirit has executed a supernatural heart transplant. It proves that the idol of mammon has been smashed and replaced with the supreme affection for Christ. The financial generosity is the visible, outward evidence of an invisible spiritual resurrection.
It's the fruit, not the root. Now, having exposed the false teachers and having clarified the theology of works and salvation, Paul turns his attention directly to his young protege, Timothy.
And by extension, this charge lands directly on you, the listener.
Yes, the text pivots sharply. Paul writes, "But as for you, O man of God, flee these things."
The contrast there is intentional. He says, but as for you, you are not to operate like the culture around you. You're not to be like the false teachers who view godliness as a revenue stream.
And notice the title he uses, O man of God. This isn't just a polite religious compliment.
No, not at all.
In the Old Testament, this specific title was reserved for prophets like Moses, Elijah, and David. It carries massive covenantal weight. He tells him to flee from the love of money. But fleeing isn't enough. You can't simply run away from an idol and leave a vacuum in your soul.
Nature abhors a vacuum, and so does the human heart. If you just empty it out and say, I will not love money, but you don't replace that affection with anything else, something far worse will eventually move in.
That is so true.
And that is why the soul must aggressively pursue positive virtues. Paul commands him to pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, steadfastness, and gentleness.
It's very active.
It is. This isn't a passive existence of just avoiding bad things. This is active, hand-to-hand spiritual warfare. It is the good fight of faith. The Christian life requires aggressive, intentional action to cultivate holiness while simultaneously sprinting away from idolatry.
And Paul doesn't just give Timothy a list of virtues to pursue. He gives him the ultimate model of what this looks like in practice. He brings in the Christological fulfillment.
Which is beautiful.
Why is Jesus Christ the supreme pattern of contentment? Jesus possessed the infinite glories of heaven. He owned the universe. Yet he voluntarily stepped into naked, vulnerable humanity.
Yes.
He took the form of a servant. He lived his entire earthly life relying entirely on the providential care of the Father. He had no permanent home, no wealth, no political action committee behind him.
And Paul highlights a very specific, highly charged historical moment in the life of Jesus to drive this home. He points Timothy to Jesus making the good confession before Pontius Pilate.
Oh, it's such a powerful scene.
Picture that historical moment. Jesus stands before the Roman governor, the representative of the most brutal empire on earth. Jesus stands there without a bank account, without an earthly army, without high-priced legal counsel, and without any political leverage.
Pilate had absolute control over life and death.
He did.
Jesus looked at the ultimate earthly authority, a man who could order his execution with a wave of his hand. And Jesus refused to flatter him. He refused to compromise the truth in exchange for physical safety or comfort. He essentially told Pilate, "My kingdom is not of this world."
Precisely. Jesus was completely free from the coercion of earthly authority because his treasure, his security, was entirely anchored in the will of the Father. He was the living embodiment of autarkia.
Yes, he was.
And immediately after referencing Christ standing boldly before Pilate, Paul erupts into a soaring doxology. The language shifts from ethical instruction to sheer worship.
Wait, I want to pause on that doxology. If I'm Timothy, I'm stressed about wealthy heretics ruining my church. I'm dealing with massive economic pressure. Why is Paul suddenly breaking into a hymn about God dwelling in unapproachable light?
It seems out of place at first glance.
Right, it feels like a tangent. How does praising God's immortality actually help Timothy deal with a wealthy bully sitting in the front row of his congregation?
It is the exact opposite of a tangent. It is the tactical cure for the problem. Paul describes God as the blessed and only sovereign, the King of kings and Lord of lords.
Right.
He says God alone possesses immortality and dwells in unapproachable light. When a believer's mind is completely filled with the absolute dominion, majesty, and unapproachable light of God, the psychological spell of earthly currency instantly breaks.
Because the contrast is so extreme.
Yes. You cannot stand in genuine awe of the King of Kings and simultaneously be obsessed with the balance of your retirement account.
That makes total sense.
The sheer magnitude of God's glory makes the little silver coins of Ephesus or the digits in a modern bank app look utterly ridiculous. Worship shrinks the apparent greatness of money and social honor down to its proper microscopic size. The doxology is the mechanism that breaks the idolatry.
That completely reframes how we view worship. It's an act of spiritual warfare against our own greed. Now, we have covered a lot of ancient history and deep theology, but the historical and theological framework we are looking at presents a massive challenge to several modern movements.
Oh, absolutely.
This isn't just a history lesson. Looking at this text, the biblical parameters argue that modern movements are essentially repeating the Ephesian heresy.
The most direct modern parallel is the prosperity gospel, often associated with the word of faith movement. When you hold their theology up to 1 Timothy chapter 6, it is a direct contradiction of Paul's teaching.
How so?
Well, the prosperity gospel peddles the exact concept that the Ephesian heretics taught, that godliness is a means to financial gain.
Let's break down the actual mechanism of the prosperity gospel. How does it operate?
Basically, it treats faith like a transaction.
Right. It takes faith, which is supposed to be a relational trust in God, and turns it into a metaphysical currency. They teach that if you have enough faith, and if you speak the right words, God is obligated by spiritual laws to make you financially prosperous, healthy, and successful in your business ventures.
It's tragic, really.
It turns the cross of Christ into a cosmic transaction for material comfort.
It fundamentally redefines God from a sovereign Lord into a cosmic vending machine that dispenses physical blessings if you input the right amount of faith. But the application of Paul's warning doesn't just stop at the extreme fringes of the prosperity gospel.
Where else do we see it?
It also heavily critiques seeker-sensitive, pragmatic church models.
This is a much more subtle danger, but arguably more widespread. How does pragmatism fall under this apostolic indictment?
Many modern church growth models operate purely on corporate business principles. They select their leaders, their elders and pastors, based on corporate success, administrative efficiency, or stage charisma.
Instead of biblical qualifications.
Yes, rather than the strict requirements of biblical holiness outlined earlier in 1 Timothy. They treat the church like a Fortune 500 company and the congregation like a consumer base that needs to be kept entertained with a polished product.
That's a huge shift in focus.
They measure divine blessing by numerical attendance and financial giving metrics rather than fidelity to the truth. They are importing the economic metrics of Ephesus right into the sanctuary.
So we have severe warnings for the poor who desire to be affluent, and we have warnings for church leadership structures. But Paul does not forget the wealthy. He provides specific instructions for the materially blessed.
He does.
If you're listening to this and you realize, okay, I live in a modern Western nation, I have a reliable vehicle, a roof over my head, disposable income by historical standards, I am the wealthy person Paul is talking to. What are the specific commands for those who possess abundance in this present age?
The commands are highly practical. First, there is a strict prohibition against pride. Paul says charge them not to be haughty.
Okay.
Having more assets does not make you wiser, it doesn't make you more disciplined, and it certainly doesn't mean you are more loved by God. It simply means you have a heavier, more complex stewardship to answer for.
That's a great perspective.
Second, they are commanded never to place their hope in the uncertainty of their assets.
Because wealth is inherently unstable. I mean, it can vanish in a stock market crash, it can be decimated by a medical emergency, or it can be rendered completely useless by hyperinflation. Your hope must be anchored in God, who is unchanging.
That's it. And that leads to the positive command. They are to be ready to share and to do good.
Which brings up a massive practical question for you, the listener. How does someone actively obey the command to be abundant in good works without turning it into a theatrical display of charity?
That's always the temptation, isn't it?
We know Jesus warned against blowing a trumpet when you give to the poor, doing it just to get praise from men. How do we give generously without making it an ego trip?
True. Biblical generosity requires a mechanical change in how you view your resources. It must be planned, sacrificial, and cheerful.
Not just an afterthought.
Right. It isn't about throwing a few spare dollars at a problem when you happen to feel guilty after watching a sad commercial. It means deliberately structuring your life to live below your means.
Wow, live below your means.
You have to view your assets not as your private property, but as a temporary sovereign trust given to you by God for a specific purpose.
So it's a complete paradigm shift from ownership to management.
Yes. Spot on. And once you view yourself as a manager, you deliberately direct those resources toward the relief of the poor, the care of the vulnerable, and the advancement of the gospel.
And you do it quietly.
You do it quietly, systematically, and with the full knowledge that you are simply passing on what was never truly yours to begin with. You are distributing the king's funds according to the king's priorities.
When you view yourself as a manager of God's resources rather than the owner of your own empire, giving becomes a massive joy rather than a reluctant tax. We have covered incredible ground today.
We really have.
Let's recap the core realization of this entire conversation. True life, the life that actually matters, is found in eternal realities, not in earthly accumulation. The relentless desire for material gain is a trap. It's a snare that will pull you under the water. But resting in God's daily provision, knowing He is a sovereign and good Father, is immense freedom.
It is the only true freedom available to the human heart. And I want to leave you with a stark final image to mull over in the days ahead.
Please do.
Think about the exact moment you finally stand before the judgment seat of Christ. In that fraction of a second, every single physical currency on earth, every digital stock portfolio, every retirement account, and every real estate deed will immediately expire.
It's completely gone.
They will become utterly worthless pieces of paper. The only value they will have in that moment is as a permanent witness, testifying either for or against how you stewarded what the king entrusted to you.
That is a staggering reality. Usually when we log into our bank accounts, we're looking for a mathematical equation for peace of mind. We look at those numbers to feel safe from the world.
We do.
But today, we want to encourage you to assess your own affections. Where are your actual points of trust? Are you measuring your security by a ledger that is destined to expire the moment your heart stops beating? Or are you resting in the unapproachable light of the King of Kings? Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope this conversation challenges your perspective and points you toward that which is truly life.